Mr. Robinson, what was the interest and drive that led you to become president of Landmarks?
I'd been interested in landmarks and historic preservation even before I got in the mayor's office. I was a member here, and I saw what they were trying to do. But when I got first-hand knowledge of what they really were doing, and as you recall, I was selected to go to Germany on a cultural exchange program for the Department of State. We spent 10 days in Germany, and I had an opportunity to really get close to it. And when you visit Munich and West Berlin and those cities over there, and have an opportunity to see how they've done it, and what it means to their people, you come away with a new appreciation. And I just came away with a new appreciation. When I got into my new job, I have some time, and I've got to deposit some of my time back to the community, and not just in the free enterprise system, but in some cultural way and in some civic way. This is one of those opportunities. I think it makes me a better person because I really am just learning now about historic preservation. I should be the water boy, not the president. Too many other people are more qualified than I to be president, but I'm honored to serve. If I can make a contribution, it'd be my pleasure.
What is the newest thing at the Alderman Shaw Complex?
We are just about to complete the restoration of the Cleveland Avenue Presbyterian Church, and we'll have dedication back here on the 4th of December.
Well, what does it look like? What is it?
Well, it's just an authentic black church. As you know, the black churches were the center of the cultural and social gatherings for the blacks in that period. And we've restored one that's authentic, and we've just got the bell up on top, and we're going to dedicate it on 4th of December.
Now that's down here in the Alderman Shaw Complex, and a number of new additions have been made lately.
That's correct. Of course, you know, the whole area here is, we've been trying to preserve and restore homes from the period and houses from the period. And you see some down here that look very nice and some that are kind of scroungy. And we're going to be beginning work on some of those in the near future. But the real purpose for this is to get homes and restore them and make them functional. As you know, we've rented one of our cottages to the J.C.'s for an office building. The Nurses Association is down here now, and we're going to have others ready for rent in the near future. And we believe it's going to be the end thing for groups to have their offices located in the area. And that really makes it to where the expenses are paid and it's functional. It pays for its upkeep, and that's what we've got to do.
The city owns the land the Alderman Shaw Complex sits on. Will the city have any future bigger interest in the complex?
Well, it's been the plan all along from back in Mayor Earl James' day that this property would be turned over to the city. And in fact, the city does hold deed to most of this property already. And in cooperation with the city, through grants and through private donations, this land has become available. Now belongs to taxpayers. And we're hopeful in the future, and the mayor and the people at folks at City Hall have indicated that they will take over the operation of this complex in the days ahead. We can't speak for them, of course. We're hopeful that this will come to pass. And then that will enable Landmarks to move to another level of interest in the city, and that being, we believe, to really get on with the matter of encouraging people in neighborhoods to restore neighborhoods. Think Oak Park. I think that some of our, well, Cottage Hills is a good example of private enterprise getting together and restoring an area. I think that that's the way it's going to have to be done. But in the process, these homes must be functional, and they must be utilized. And if we can do that, then we can save more homes.
Do you have an overall plan as the president of the Landmarks Foundation for the city to preserve old houses and to have something that is aesthetic as well as functional, or are you going to take separate individual gems, so to speak, and make them, well, rather than museum pieces, to have more use with them?
I think it's going to be some of each and some of both. We obviously have some very fine pieces of architecture that are located in various places. We've got to speak to that, and they have been speaking to it. But I think the big thrust for Landmarks and for those of us in the community that are interested in historic preservation is for us to get busy now with the rehabilitation of neighborhoods and to save the character of neighborhoods, not just one neighborhood, but all across the city. And this takes leadership and knowledge and matching up of federal programs with free enterprise. And when you match it up like that and everybody has a part of the action, it can work. Some folks are going to Savannah, Tom Blunt and Jim Loeb, and some other folks are going to Savannah to a conference where people have done just this. They've matched up available existing programs with this kind of thing, and and makes it work, and they've made it work. And that's what we've got to do. And they're going, and I hope when they come back they'll have some kind of a roadmap for us to go with. To answer your question, no, I don't have any great, grandiose overall plan. I can tell you that James Loeb and others have worked awfully hard, given much of themselves, of their own talents and their own resources, to get this program to the place it is today. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. It's time now for the broad base of support to be expanded. And as you know, and you've cooperated with us, you know we're in the middle of a membership drive right now. I might say that the membership requests have gone out, and we're having a good response from our people. And when the response goes off a little bit, we're going to start calling folks. So we've got to let everybody in the community become knowledgeable about landmarks and about historic preservation and preservation, really, of our city and within our city. And when we do that, then it'll have the broad base of support that it must have if it's going to continue to be viable. I think another thing that we might call attention to, we have some schools that are being vacated, and we've had some discussions about the future of those schools, the Sayre Street School, the Houston Hills, the other places. And there are some folks that are recommending that we turn those into townhouse complexes. Sounds like a great idea, but that takes money, and it takes creativity, it takes patience, it takes banks that want to make loans to folks like that. So I believe, though, we can put it all together. And if we put it all together, then we're going to do something that will enable our grandchildren and their children's children to enjoy the period structures of this city. And whenever you have a community that really preserves its history and its tradition and calls attention to it and remembers it, then there's a peacefulness that comes upon folks that makes them better citizens, because they know where they come from and where they're going.
And help get this off the ground. But it's meant a lot through the years and will continue the year industry coming to the state of Alabama. You might be interested in.
The first board was chaired by Senator W.W. Garrett, who was one of the instigators and movers for the passage of this legislation back in the I think we can get it to burn fast if we do it.
We don't want to burn it too fast, Governor.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going.
Job. It is through programs and actions like these that I think we have made it clear that Air University has a responsibility for and a course which would be given to all. We have placed emphasis on the quality of our instruction, the substance, that is what we teach, and on efficiency, to do it as well as we can and at as low a cost as we can. I think we've made real progress in all three of these things. Let me talk briefly about efficiency. In the last 4 fiscal years, we have reduced the number of permanent party here at Maxwell by almost 550 people. And we have done that without reducing the jobs that we perform, without reducing in a major way the education that we provide. We have in fact added courses during that 4-year period. But in looking for efficiency, we have reduced that number of spaces. A quick trip through multiple areas of technology, lasers throughout the Air Force. It has worked very well and is a real innovation in how to help the people in the Air Force do a better job. It is through programs and actions like these that I think we have made it clear that
I think that from what I have heard and from the way the pros have been talking about it, there's going to be an awful lot of noise before they're going to let them drop it. I would really hate to see these tournaments drop. I think they're Well, they're good tournaments, and the people are very anxious to have golf here. For that reason. Now, of course, on the other hand, if they're not making it financially, then maybe the best thing is to drop them. I don't, as I said, I think the pros are going to stick up for the tournaments. They want them to go on.
In our research on the subject of voodoo, we discovered that it may have been conceived by a disgruntled Catholic priest, Pierre Valdez, several hundred years ago. His followers identified themselves as followers of Valdez, and somehow the word voodoo was derived from Valdez's name. Another school of thought says the origin of voodoo was in West Africa, and that West Africa is the birthplace of the voodoo worshippers. It is not clear who is correct, but we do know that there may be hundreds of variations of the voodoo. By the time it reached our shores, many changes had occurred, and in each region, believers in voodoo vary in their ways of practice.
Among the strongest beliefs held by persons in Alabama who practice and believe in voodoo is that certain people amongst us have the power of life and death, that they can cause illness or cause you to have good fortune, and that there are a variety of roots, powders, and oils, and other strange substances, and that they are their only defense against these strange powers. Some people in Coosa County, Alabama, believe that about the Reverend William Maxwell. Some say he killed 5 people and was never convicted of murder. Although no one has offered to say how the Reverend Maxwell used his alleged power, most citizens, especially blacks in the county, are afraid to discuss him. Coosa County probate judge Jasper Fielding served as sheriff of that county for a number of years before being elected to his present post. Judge Fielding describes the aura of fear that hung over the Coosa County community while Reverend Maxwell was living.
Well, Dorcas Anderson Maxwell was his second wife, and we had a thorough investigation into this case. It involved quite a lot of work, and we was checking out insurance companies who might have policies on them, and we found quite a few. And we had some witnesses that had seen preacher threaten to kill Dorcas. And when he was alive, a lot of people were afraid of him. I sold a lot of pistol permits to people who stated their reason for wanting a pistol permit, but they were afraid of Reverend Maxwell. And then a lot of people thought that he had strong powers, mystic powers, and believed that he practiced voodoo. And this hampered us in our investigation because they were afraid to talk to us because he might put a spell on them. And this was real consistent. Almost, I'd say, half the people we talked to, the black community, were apprehensive about talking to us or letting anyone else know that they talked to us.
There appears to be many ways to practice voodoo. Much of it is secret. But we were able to determine that Africans and Haitians hold marathon ceremonies where there's a lot of drum beating, and those participating in the rites appear to go into a trance-like stupor and remain that way for hours. In our search for information on voodoo, we discovered that Montgomery attorney Maurice Bell and his family spent a total of 6 years in Haiti. There, he says, voodoo is an important part of the culture of Haitian citizens.
Bell, you lived and worked in Haiti for a period of about 6 years, and I'm interested to know what your observations were of the effects of voodoo on the lives of the people in Haiti.
Well, they say that Haiti is 95% Catholic and 100% voodoo, and I would say that it affects 100% of the people in Haiti one way or another. You hear chants all the time. during the seasons when voodoo is prominent. And they practice it just as we practice our religions here in the States. It's similar. It takes its religion from Judaism, Catholicism, Protestantism, and I think it's a mixture of that with its own basic thoughts and ideas. So it's a very much part of their everyday life.
Well, especially when they had a drought in Haiti, you could hear the voodoo drums beating all night long in every part of the city trying to bring rain. And the people really believed that the voodoo was the answer, voodoo prayers, to bringing the rain to the people.
Is this a religion? What would you call it?
Well, it's a religion.
In our next report, strange plants that have devastating powers and how some of them may have been used in the Coosa County murders.
Forth and voice our concern, pro or con, any issue that comes before us. And I'm certainly in sympathy with the concern expressed by them, because that's not the issue now. The issue is the law on the side of the...
Hearing on resolution 664-77.
All in favor of the motion to approve the resolution.
Resolution appointing Mr. John C. Spears to public assemblies on the south side of Adams Street, First Lot, west of Central and Georgia Railroad.
This is the public hearing on resolution 6. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, the resolution is properly before us at this time. Harris.
Side Keystone Street, crossing 634 Keystone.
This is the public hearing on resolution 669-77.
671-77, Weeds on the south side of Adams Street, First Lot, west of Central and Georgia Railroad.
This is the public hearing on resolution 674.
There'll soon be an outlet for it, as long as people like yourself.
Mr. Stevens, what are your plans for next year?
Well, at this point, we're hoping to have a bigger house than this year. Every year we want to get bigger. And so at this point, we're in the process of making plans for next year and hoping to come up with a bigger and a better haunted house than we've had this year, which at this point has turned out to be the best one we ever had.
Well, how'd you turn out this year?
Roughly 17,000. We don't have an official count yet. We'll have to check all of our money and how much we've banked and all that sort of stuff. But roughly 17,000 through our main house and somewhat less than 4,000 through the pumpkin patch, which will put us at 21,000 people, which is a record for us so far.
Are you going to continue the pumpkin patch?
We hope to. I think
that's a nice addition for children.
It really is. We didn't do it our first and second year, and we found a lot of people were bringing their small kids through, and they would get extremely scared, and we don't recommend that they do. And so in searching around, we were trying to decide what to do for the little kids, and also as a ways of raising some money for the JCEDs. And so we came up with a pumpkin patch, I think, 3 years ago, and it's just been a tremendous success ever since.
What is your money going for this year?
Well, most of the money will go to the General Richard Montgomery Riverboat. It's used for various things. We have a Christmas shopping tour for underprivileged kids. Some of it is helped to use in the General JC Fund to help run the organization because we do have some expenses, but mostly to the riverboat.
You get thousands of people coming through that.
On an average night, more than 1,000. That's about our average figure. In fact, there'll be some nights, I think our least night was somewhat over 600. That was the least we had at any one night.
Some nights would run 1,700 people, and that's a big night.
Some of them come out a little bit scared, too.
A lot scared. You can really tell they're scared when they leave after the first room or halfway through the first room.
Most of the people who are participating as monsters, etc., are JCs.
Most of them are JCs. Basically, it's a JC project. Now, we did have a lot of help out of some students from Huntington this year because they wanted to get involved. And on nights when we found ourselves up having manpower problems, we'd call the group over at Huntington. They'd come over. The Jeff Davis Art Club was quite instrumental this year. They approached us to do some artwork in the house. So they did a lot of the painting that people have seen if they went through there. We have a lot of eyes drawn on one of the stairs done in fluorescent paint, and in the back on one of the stairways going down the back, it looked like you were walking through space. They had stars and planets and all sorts of stuff, and it was all lit by a black light. And they did a lot of work, so they helped us out. In fact, they did one of the rooms for us. We let them do that because we appreciated their help so much.
Some of your condemned men, goblins, etc., have a knack for coming from behind the crowd.
True. Well, usually when we plan these rooms, we plan them for the greatest shock effect, and we like to get their attention away from what's really going to happen. For instance, in our first room, the scene featured Mr. and Mrs. Hirschfield sitting in a separate room from the crowd. The crowd would look in at them, and they were drinking tea, and they'd get up and ask for Gregory to show the people out because they didn't want visitors in the house. And they would approach the crowd, and the crowd would think one of them was going to jump at them, either Mr. or Mrs. Hirschfield, and what would happen is Gregory would come lunging from behind a compartment, behind curtains from behind them, and just completely freak them out and head them up the stairs and get them out of the room.
Yes, he did, and I was standing there, and he came over and got me from behind on my shoulder, and a giant of a man.
Really? Well, we used, I'll let a trade secret out. We used big lifters, big high shoes. They must have been a foot tall themselves, and we'd get the tallest JC we could find. So the guy'd end up 8.5 feet tall or something, you know, and it was just unbelievable. We'd get the biggest JC we could find, and usually he was quite imposing when he came out of there and scared people.
Well, behind the scenes, what about your lighting and your sound system? How does that work?
Well, each room is done individually. Each room has its own lighting system and sound system. Basically, every room has 2 or 3 guides stationed in the room, and each one has a separate responsibility. Maybe one to get the people in, one to get the people out. Another one might control the lights and the sound. The light, of course, the lighting would have its switches placed somewhere in the room for the guide to operate. There would also be a remote switch for the sound system. We have an entire central sound room, which we've developed through the years. We didn't do this the first couple of years. We tried to use individual tape machines in the rooms, and it didn't work out so well. So we went out and invested a lot of money, and it probably cost us at least $5,000 to replace it today. It cost us a little over 3 years ago. So what we do is each room has its own sound system, and all the sound is on a tape and on a tape machine, and it's all remote control from the room. There's a man who starts the sound, and after it's through, he turns the tape machine off.
Larry, do you have professional help in planning your sequence of events, planning your rooms?
No, most of the time we do it ourselves. Now, we do share a lot of ideas with other JC groups around the country. We have, our JC meetings, where we go to in our conventions and so on. And we'll get together and discuss things like what they've done at other JC houses. But mostly, everything we did this year was basically an original idea conceived by ourselves, just sitting down and talking about it and remembering what we did in years past and what worked well and what didn't work well, and coming up with new ideas for them. But mostly the sound is completely planned by JCs themselves. We go to a recording studio and produce all the sound for it. We try and do that and make it very professional with all the music building and at the proper point, when the monster's going to come out and stuff like that. But as far as the sound and the acting in the rooms, it's done by us.
I know that initially your biggest problem is getting the house. What do? You go in and you look at the different rooms, you have to knock down walls?
Usually what we'll end up doing is every year we start very early, and we're finding we have to start earlier and earlier every year because it's getting harder to find old houses. Most of the time they're houses that are in the process of being torn down. So what we do is we'll go find a house somebody will let us use, usually for no charge. We go in, we look at the rooms. A lot of times we will end up taking out walls, knocking new doorways, building walls. But it takes a lot of work to get these houses ready. But I estimated the other day in man hours alone building this house, just getting it ready, was over 2,000. That didn't include all the committee meetings, all the time that the committee spent on their own on the phone. That's untold number of hours, into the thousands. But just preparing the house took at least 2,000 man hours.
So then you'll be getting an early start next year.
I hope so. I hope they name the chairman right after we get, well, as soon as we wrap this one up and get all of our money counted and done away with and squared away. So I hope sometime within the next few weeks, next year's chairman, because we find that the earlier we name a chairman for the house, for the project, the easier it is to get the project going and the smoother it goes. We got a very early start this year in comparison to previous years. We found our house this year back in July, and we worked for about 3 months. So we had at least a month's head start on any previous year. And it's, in my opinion, turned out to be the best house we ever had because of the added time.
Have about 260 to 70 employees and 57 offices in the state. And Farmers Home Administration is, we've been in business here, I think, since 1938. First known as the seed program, I think. And this is my first day on the job, George. And but I understand about 260 employees. And we have 57 offices throughout the state of Alabama.
Basically doing what?
Making loans to people, trying to help people that can't get loans with banks or other people that cannot get a secure loan. And we'll guarantee the loan for them. And this is for farmers and for rural housing, community facilities, and basically we try to be an overall program and to go into small towns and help with the economy. If there's a high unemployment in an area, then we can fund a plant, loan money to, say, a pipe plant to go in there, and then we'll pull in other organizations, government organizations, to try to help train these people.
Hello.
Hello, I'd like to pick up my telephone, please.
All right, sir. Let's see. Now, what is the name on this?
It's Dudley, D-U-D-L-E-Y.
The customer, when he comes to this particular phone center store, has previously called our business office, and we have referenced a file of customers that would be available to have this type of service. If that customer qualifies for this particular service, then our service representatives in the office offers him an option of doing this. If he so chooses, then he will come to the particular phone center store here, and his telephone sets will be available to him here, and the service representative that's here will show him and demonstrate to him how to install the telephone on his own, and he can pick it up and go home and plug in his telephone, and then he has telephone service.
Okay, this service is confined to a small group right now.
Right now, there's some 1,200 customers in Montgomery. As disconnect activity takes place, then we're converting all of that disconnect activity to what we call modular wiring. And with modular wiring, then the customer is available to have this type of service. Hopefully, in the future, certainly we will have everyone on this service, but it will be a process of disconnect activity.
At least 4 members of the Reverend William Maxwell's family were found dead, all in alleged traffic-related accidents. Authorities believed foul play, but could never prove it. Investigators also say when Maxwell was shot and killed at a funeral, he had a small bag in his pocket with a substance that toxicology have not been able to identify. It's also been reported to us that state police were known to have stopped Maxwell on numerous occasions for traffic violations, and they report that many times, especially at night, the Reverend Maxwell would have clothespins clamped to his ears. He is alleged to have told one Coosa County traffic officer that he did that to ward off evil spirits. So far, there's been no documented evidence that the late Reverend Maxwell used any type of voodoo powers on anybody. But trained scientists say somebody in Coosa County may have knowledge of plants and their uses, not on the official list of things to look for when the cause of death is being sought in the state crime lab. Many Coosa Countyans believe the Reverend Maxwell used some kind of voodoo rituals to take the lives of family members, but he was never convicted of any murder. In our next installment, an overview of the voodoo.
Dr. Roper, in your opinion, is it possible for practitioners of witchcraft and voodoo and sorcery, is it possible for these people to have knowledge of toxic roots and plants that would cause death, and scientists such as you would not be able to determine that cause of death because of no tests that have been developed yet?
To the best of my understanding, many of the people who one would classify as practitioners of the arts have knowledge of various plants, plant poisons. You know, a lot of it stems from the old country medicine or helpful plants, poisonous plants. They have knowledge of these, and there are thousands of toxic substances, you know, known to man.
And some unknown to even the most trained scientists.
I'm sure new toxic substances are being discovered. And I think this is a rather routine factor. But many of them we would never search for. We know of no tests, you know, devised to determine the presence or absence. And in a forensic laboratory, such as what I'm associated with, we search basically for, say, routine drugs of abuse, routine poisons, just general toxic substances. And without some additional information, the sky's the limit in the possibilities of whatever toxic substance may be present in these people. It's just thousands of them.
One voodoo practice is to cut off the head of a snake. In it, plant the seed of a swamp plant. Bury the head in a grave that must be 7 days old, and you pour water on it for 3 nights. When the plant has grown 3 feet, go again to the grave, strip naked, pull up the swamp plant, and use it as a girdle. And if anyone attempts to attack you, the girdle will become a snake, and that's one voodoo recipe for protection from enemies. In our next segment, we report on the growing interest in voodoo and black magic and things to use to cast or ward off spells.
Well, I wasn't do an earthquake. I think I caught it one way or the other. Don't forget to start me up at 220 on the tape.
Everyone, more than 1,000 residents have been forced from their homes in Pensacola and Santa Rosa County, Florida, because of ammonia gas that has escaped from a derailed railroad car. One man, a doctor, has died. His wife and 2 children are hospitalized. They're in critical condition because of this deadly gas. Fred Francis is on the scene.
This is poisonous ammonia gas. There are 15 ammonia tank cars just like this one, derailed at this hour on the edge of a well-to-do suburb of Pensacola. 3 of the ammonia tank cars ruptured when the Louisville-Nashville freight train went off the tracks early last night. A cloud of the toxic gas immediately engulfed a nearby home, killing a doctor, critically injuring his wife and 2 children. As the gas spread through the neighborhood, police and rescue squads went door to door, getting more than 1,000 residents to flee their homes. 12 other people had to be rushed to the hospital.
Ammonia, strong like this, coming in concentrated doses, will blister the lungs. A person can't breathe and will be dead in just a few minutes. The people who live in this area were very lucky that a cold front moved in and the wind carried all this ammonia gas out across the bay.
County Administrator Joe Moody said if the weather had not changed, several hundred would have died. He is angry at the railroad line because this is the second derailment involving ammonia gas in Pensacola in the past 3 weeks.
I'm upset because the first time it wasn't taken seriously. We've now had a loss of life. There have been a record in the last 12 months of a number of derailments. In the last 18 months, there have been 3 in this area alone. I think that tells you something. I think there's some responsibility to the public. And I think that responsibility is not only shared by the company, but I think it's shared by the federal government, who didn't respond and react to the first instance.
Emergency shelters have been set up around Pensacola for those who fled their homes. They will have to wait until all the gas escapes from the ruptured tank cars and the train is removed before they can return. Fred Francis, NBC News, Pensacola.
Israel, the Army Corps of Engineers started a formal investigation of why that dam collapsed in Georgia early Sunday, taking 38 lives. The White House ordered the Corps into action. President Carter is also asking for details of that train derailment yesterday near Pensacola, Florida. Here's Fred Francis with that story.
The White House wants to know what happened. Federal train safety officials are investigating, and the National Transportation Safety Board has promised a complete report. There's a lot of attention on the Pensacola train derailment, not because the accident is unique, but because freight trains running off the tracks are becoming commonplace, and municipal officials all over the country are demanding action. One of them is Pensacola's Joe Mooney. He says railroad companies like the Louisville and Nashville, which own the train derailed Wednesday night, are too cozy with federal inspectors, and that means a lot of accidents.
LNN, Louisville and Nashville, has had over 30 derailments in the last 34 months, 18 in the last year and a half, which averages 1 a month, the last one 3 weeks ago.
As late as Tuesday of this week, the day before yesterday, an inspector of the Federal Railroad Administration toured our track, specifically the track where this tragic accident occurred, and found no serious fault with it.
The people who escaped the ammonia poisoning and moved back into their homes yesterday are asking the same questions as the investigators. If everything is so safe, why can't railroads keep their trains on the tracks? Fred Francis, NBC News, Pensacola.
It's 12 minutes after.